And welcome back to Pastor Plek's podcast. I'm your host, Pastor Plek, and joining me in studio is none other than Caleb McLemore, the official husband of Melanie McLemore, one of the faithful staff members here at Wells Branch Community Church. Welcome, Caleb.
Thanks for having me. That's being Melanie's husband is how most people know my name. So for most people, that'll be the first time I've actually learned my name.
Awesome. Well, we're glad to have you. Can't wait to hear you share a little bit. And then also, Holland Greg, pastor from Eastside Community Church, also part-time pastor at Wells Branch Community Church, and helps us, he has been working, if you didn't know this, he is working here pretty much to the bone.
Yeah, to the bone.
Yeah. He's doing counseling, preach planning. He's doing church planning, residency with people at our church. He's pretty much...
I'll be teaching men's Bible study next Tuesday morning.
Men's Bible study is what he'll be teaching. And he's doing a marketing planning plan for our new building and space. So you've pretty much been all over the place as well as the counseling.
Very good. It's a lot of fun.
A lot of fun. So not only that, you had to preach last Sunday. Had to. It was probably a lot of work and a lot of something that you had to spend hours slaving away to put together.
You know what? I am a slave to Jesus Christ, and I enjoy slaving away for the glory of God.
All right, so one of the things you talked about was the Shema. Now, talk to us about what Shema means.
Okay, so Shema, Hebrew word for listen or hear. It's an important word in the Hebrew language. It's in from Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. That word hear.
Deuteronomy 6:4 for those of you scoring at home.
That's right. Very important. You know, they begin each day, praying and singing this verse. And, so it's a very important word in that it's a part of these prayers, part of their liturgy for their day. And the word itself, I talked about in the sermon, the reason it's relevant to James is that it means listen or hear, but it carries the understanding of obedience with it, that your listening to God is not complete until you have obeyed God. So there's not a Hebrew word, a separate Hebrew word for obey. It's just this word hear. And so to hear, to really truly hear, is to obey.
Okay, that's wild. I wonder why they didn't have a simple obey word. Don't they have an obey word or no?
Not in ancient Hebrew. So
not in ancient. Okay, wow,
Oh.
Crazy. All right, so Caleb, as one who grew up in church, have you ever heard the word Shema?
Maybe in passing, but never a big focus on it. But so I've heard it on and off just over the years, but not not broken down, especially the way we talked about it on Sunday.
Yeah. Well, way to go, Holland. You were able to bring in, for somebody who's a lifelong churchgoer, something a little bit more in-depth than he probably was prepared for. Speaking of which, you had an outline, which went something like this: prepare for it, prioritize it, practice it. So tell me where you got into this, especially about, some people may have been offended by calling everybody filthy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You think so?
It was pretty scary.
Bible has some offensive stuff in it.
Yeah.
Right? So the outline, just coming from the main thrust, what I said was the main thrust of that section and the whole theme of James is to be a doer of the word. So he explicitly says that in that passage, the end of chapter 1, talks a lot about it, faith that works, in chapter 2, getting into that. You've named the whole, theme for the series, Just Do It, right? So it's very much a big thrust of the book is to be a doer of the word. And so what I talked about was, okay, how do we, what does it mean to be a doer of the word? What James says in this passage is to prepare for it. So to prepare your heart to receive God's word by repenting from sin, by confessing sin, and then prioritize it, meaning you make a intentional effort, a conscious decision. I'm not just going to hear what it says. I'm going to do what it says.
Okay.
And then practice it. You go out and do it.
When you talked about in the prioritizing, you talked about looking into the perfect law at like a mirror. And it talks about the law of liberty. Now, law and liberty sometimes to me mean two completely opposite things.
Yeah.
Can you explain the law of liberty, what that means?
Yeah, so, it feels like a contradiction because a law, a rule prohibits something. It says don't do, go here and not here, or don't do this, do that. And so it seems limiting, but if you think about So you ever bowl? You ever go bowling?
Yes.
You know the gutter things that you
Yep,
can put up, the gutter guards. You don't. When you put those up, you know that
Gives you more freedom to bowl boldly.
if you if without those things up, if your goal is to get the ball down to the end of the lane, you know, you might fail at that. Those things, they seem more restrictive, but what they actually do is they make sure that your ball gets to the end of the lane. The restriction actually helps your ball get where it needs to go. This is what a good law does. God's law is restrictive in the sense of it keeps you from sin so that you might go where you find freedom in life.
Experience freedom and joy in Jesus.
Exactly.
Because ultimately, I think here's when you, well, I don't know if you've ever seen those shirts. I think it's Jocko Willink's shirts. Discipline equals freedom. And so when you, kind of obey the law on your own, then there's this freedom of following whatever you do is awesome. So I love that aspect, but within context of Christ, of where he is the law of liberty, where like faith in Jesus and the freedom that he brings from sin, and I think that might be where he's getting at as well, just like this freedom from sin, this freedom of darkness, and that when you trust in Christ, you are now living for him as opposed to living for sin.
Yeah.
Anything else there you want to kind of throw in there in law of liberty?
Yeah, okay, so a lot of times when we think of freedom, we think of totally untethered to anything.
Right.
It's not what biblical
Anarchy.
freedom is.
Is that'd be
Yeah,
anarchy?
that just means I am doing whatever, you know, I'm totally untethered. I'm not bound to anything. Biblical freedom is about being bound to Jesus.
Nice.
You're a slave to Christ. He's your master. You are bound to him. Paul introduced himself as a bondservant of Christ, right?
Right.
That's what freedom is, because where Christ goes is where true life is found. And so to be bound to him is to actually experience freedom from sin, freedom from bondage to sin, freedom from the death that comes from sin, freedom from the destruction and the chaos and the lack of peace. And you're set free from all of that. But you are not completely untethered. You are actually bound to Jesus, who is taking you somewhere where life and peace is found.
So, Caleb, as a pastor's kid, talk to me real quick about how you experienced the law as you were seeking liberty growing up.
Well, I guess the easiest way to put it is, growing up, my dad had to have a conversation with me because he became the head pastor when I was about around 12, but he had been head of the deacons and our own pastors, heavily involved ever since I was a toddler.
Right.
And
was he a professional seminary trained guy, or was he already just kind of was a volunteer?
He had gone to Holland Simmons,
Okay.
but I hadn't gone seminary specifically to be a pastor. He's the epitome of, if you had told him in his 20s what he would have been in his 40s, he would have laughed at you. Of one, I'm not going to go to church regularly.
Right.
Two, I'm going to be a pastor in what world? Right. And so the fact that he even became a pastor is huge.
Nice.
But he had a conversation where he set me down and goes, because you are a pastor's kid, you're going to be judged on things that other kids will not get in trouble for.
Right.
And he goes, not because of me, because, political stuff in the church, people trying to, the pastor's kid is held to a higher standard. So I guess I had a higher level of law that I was held to. And he goes, it's not fair. He goes, there are going to be times they're going to bring you to me thinking I'm going to get you in trouble. He goes, you're fine. Because people are just going to get mad at you for things that you shouldn't get mad for because you're 12.
Yeah.
But so for me, that's what it was like growing up.
So a very grace-filled home.
Yeah, my dad, my parents were very grace heavy. It's just a lot of people in the church, depending on who was around, sometimes weren't so much.
Nice.
But they were. Unless you
awesome.
did break the rule, then you got to see a little bit of wrath. But that's how it is.
Okay, I love that. All right, so let's talk about this putting to practice. Talk about putting to practice was keeping your tongue bridled. And if you can't do it, your religion is worthless. Worthless. That's a little extreme, Holland.
Oh, yeah, we didn't even get back to the filthiness and the worthless.
Yeah, I know. It's
So
this is where James is bringing some left hook, uppercut smashes. He is not holding back.
Right. And what I said, on Sunday, which I think is important for Bible readers, is we have to have a category in our mind of blunt, intense, direct speech that is also loving.
Yeah.
So he's not being, and I pointed out how at the beginning of the passage from Sunday, he addresses them as my beloved brothers. So what he says, to rid yourself of filthiness and rampant wickedness. You know,
Right.
it's like, man, that's a really intense way to. That's not like, hey, just stop doing bad things. That's like, you have filth and wickedness inside of you that you need to get rid of. Like, that's way more intense. If you don't do X, Y, Z, you know, that he talks about here, your religion is worthless, he says. Like, so it's very intense.
Yeah.
But it's coming from a place of love. And if you've heard the phrase before, clarity is kindness, you know, it's like, by
Your
giving
religion
someone.
is worthless.
What's that?
So just saying, your religion is worthless.
Yeah.
I'm being kind to you.
You know, it might sound really intense or whatever, but it gets to the heart of the matter of saying, like, nobody actually wants a worthless religion. And if you beat around the bush and you go soft on that and you're just really vague and ambiguous so that you don't offend anyone and no one gets mad at you, that might make you feel better because, hey, no one's mad at you. You didn't offend anyone, but you didn't actually help the person that you're trying to help. And so James is direct with love.
So let's just, I think there might be some people out there going, what exactly is an unbridled tongue? Is that curse words? Is that gossip? Is that coarse joking? What exactly is it?
Yeah, we didn't even get too much into that in the message, mainly focused on what he talked about with keeping yourself. So I talked about inward moral purity and outward ministry to the needy.
Yeah.
You know, he says visiting orphans and widows in their affliction and keeping oneself unstained from the world. So really focused more on that. The unbridled tongue didn't get to really cover too much of.
Well,
And
he's
so-
going to get into it in, I think,
Yeah.
the end of chapter 2, and he's going to
Chapter 2
talk.
and 3,
He's going to talk about, like, you know, out of the same mouth or out of the same, you know, comes blessing and curses. You know, fresh water and salt water can't come from the same spot.
Yep.
But what he's saying is that it's the source. It's revealing what the source of your heart is.
Exactly.
And so when you have the filthiness coming out of your mouth, that might be a sign that your religion is worthless.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty hardcore. It makes you stop and think about, what did I say recently? Is my religion worthless? Because you're like, ooh, I need to do some repenting, clearly.
Well, and I think when he says worthless, you know, he's talking about of what good is it doing for anyone else?
Nice.
You know, he's saying your religion is supposed to,
Bring value.
yeah, other people should benefit from the fact that you're a Christian. Is the way I said it. And if the way that you are a Christian is filthiness in your heart and coming out of your mouth, and you're not caring for people in need, what good is your religion to anyone else? And so that's not how religion is meant to be. Worthy, not worthless, right? It's meant to bring value to.
Yeah, I really like the way you put that. Like, I think you're right, because my first thought is, well, my religion, my faith is worthless, and that's not what you're saying. It's saying, like, it's worthless to those around you because you're not blessing them; you are cursing them in a
Yeah,
sense.
brings no good to anyone.
Right.
And so that's
No
not
value,
what
no
God
worth.
wants for you.
That's
Yeah.
good. So in the practice that you came up with 2 like takeaways, there's going to be inward moral purity and then an outward ministry to the needy. That's kind of a way that you know your heart is right before God, is that you have an inward moral purity, which is then reflected in your speech, and then an outward ministry to the needy. So Caleb, talk to me about you just like growing up. Did you guys ever have like any ministry to the needy? And was there ever any oppressing, I guess? I don't know. Like, did your dad or your mom talk to you about inward moral purity at home?
Oh, they're big on making sure we were, like, my sisters and I, well, because of the age gap, they were out of the house by the time I was like 8. But,
Yeah.
they were big on making sure we were consistent of, like, you can't, like an unbridled tongue. You talk, like, if I'm sitting there cussing a storm or something, they're like, that's not being a Christian. You can't sit there and think that doing some good deeds is going to make up for talking like that.
Right.
Because obviously your heart's not in the right spot.
Right.
So they're making sure of, like, what you're pointing out of, especially growing up playing sports, it's you practice how you play. So they're big on
That's good.
if the way you act in the small, how you act in the small moments is how you'll act in the big moments.
Right.
If you can't even obey God for something as small as, you know, when they would tell me, you know, go put something up, why on earth would I obey when God's saying, hey, do this much bigger thing?
Yeah.
So I would say that's probably the big thing is, like, just practice like you practice the way you play.
Yeah. It's good.
So just make it, because, like, it's a consistency thing. And like you're pointing out, if it's not consistent, it will show in how your heart is compared to even if your actions are good.
How about the outward ministry to the needy?
I saw a lot with my dad just because grew up in our church, as he jokes, and I got it from him, of our coping mechanism is jokes.
Yeah.
So he jokes of, we used to have an older church and then nature took care of it. And so he dealt with a lot of hospital trips, a lot of like so-and-so's in the hospital because of X, Y, or Z.
Right.
Or I think before he retired, he did 103 funerals.
That's impressive.
In a 20-year run.
Wow.
And so just seeing how
it's impressive.
The way he was helping out the needy people, and just a ton of people that would come to his church while he was in the office saying, hey, I need a few bucks for a Greyhound, or I need help to get school supplies for people who have never been to our church and would actually never come back. But he would help make sure, like, hey, you need these school supplies or you need some clothes. And he would give until the church was like, we're down to the money we need to pay the lights and we have nothing else to give. Mm-hmm. So I saw that regularly, and I saw a few times where he gave out of, his own pocket. Mm-hmm. If the church didn't have any more money, and he's like, then I'll pay for it.
Right.
So I watched him do that many times. I've told people, I think I had someone ask me once, like, what should I expect if, like, my kids are going to be a pastor's kid? What should they be expecting? I was like, that you'll be hanging out, and then, he'll look at the phone. I go, oh, I got to go because someone needs help.
Yeah.
Because that's being a pastor's kid 101 is dad's on call 24/7. So I saw that all the time.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I think one of the things that I've also seen in inward moral purity is crushing without an outward extension of ministry. Because if you can't see that, so like there's this inward spiritual grace of like a sense of holiness and discipline, especially in younger followers of Christ, that if you don't give out, if you're not being merciful to others, then you don't understand the mercy you've received. And so the act of giving to the poor or serving the poor or doing some sort of ministry with those who are in need is unbelievably healthy for your spiritual well-being. And it makes you, because the reason why people get depressed, they keep thinking about themselves. Right. The reason why the anxiety hits, the reason why the depression hits is because I can't trust God's taking care of me. I can't trust that everything is going to be okay. And my own sin is so bad that God couldn't love me or bless me. And so all of a sudden, when you start to do an outward ministry to the poor, you get to, it's not just that that's the pure religion. You receive as much as you give in that circumstance. Wouldn't you say there, Holland?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jesus said it's more blessed to give than to receive, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's more growth that happens, more joy that happens when you are serving and giving to other people than just when you're the recipient of it.
Right. And I think what people who don't do both things, if they receive grace but then never give it, that creates stinginess.
Yeah.
If they give grace but never receive it, that also kind of creates a burnout crispiness that like I've got nothing to give. And so that's why you need both of these aspects. Inward moral purity is a receiving of God's grace over and over again so that you don't sin, but it also public service to people is a really powerful way. Now, Holland, at your church, what way has your church specifically been able to bless the community?
Over the last 7 years, done a number of different things. One of the most fruitful things that we still do currently is a monthly outreach to the laundromat. Mm-hmm. I've talked about this on here before, I think, too, but we offer free tacos and coffee and laundry to the community. And it's just it's something that our associate pastor, worship director, Trent, came up with when we were like, how do we meet people where they are, meet a practical need, and be able to, do some spiritual good, pray and share the gospel with people. And it wasn't something that I would think of. I'm not someone who uses a laundromat, but it was one of the first things he thought of. He was like, hey, here's where people are, the apartments, low-income apartments around here. They don't have washer and dryers. Everyone goes to the laundromat. Let's go meet a real need and then tell people about, how they can have their spiritual needs met. And so we've been doing that every month for a year and a half or 2 years now, I think. And it's been a very fruitful way to, visit, connect with a lot of people who have a lot of needs and who are struggling. Almost everyone that we've connected with has been unchurched, and we've been able to see some of them receive the gospel, come to church, and be able to bless them spiritually, pray for them, go to their houses, things like that. So that's one that's been.
How could someone get involved with that ministry? Is that open to only for your church, or do you want other people to come join you?
No, people can come join. It's always nice to have extra hands. There's always work to do. Sometimes some months we have smaller teams. Other months we have a lot of people. If we ever have too many, volunteers or people helping to fit inside the place, then we send a team out into the apartments next door to go knock on doors and pray for people.
You have something for.
Oh yeah.
So people could just email you at holland@eccatx.com.
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, and also if you want to get involved with serving the poor at our church, one of the things that we do really fun, that is really fun, is our benevolence gala, where we raise money to give out. So St. Aaron, as he's known around here, is constantly on the move, giving out money, meeting with people, serving the needs. He's a deacon at our church and constantly serving. And so he helps distribute the money that you've given. And roughly we give about $40,000 away a year. And so we'd love for you to take part in that, either by serving alongside Aaron or giving to the ministry. And Aaron doesn't get paid. He's a deacon. He just serves out of the overflow and abundance of his heart, and hence the term St. Aaron. You can't pray to him, and he accepts no relics, but he is really good. He's really great, dude. And we would love for you to join us at our benevolence gala. Go to wellsbranchchurch.com and sign up for that, because you don't want to miss being a part of our gala experience. All right. Hey, if you got any questions or you want to help out more around the church and what it is to have a religion that's undefiled and not worthless, come and join us. Text us in at 737-231-0605, or just message us at pastorplek.com. We'd love to hear from you. From our house to yours, have an awesome week of worship.